Jason Statham, the unyielding essence of contemporary film, the individual who elevated the Transporter, Crank, and the Fast and Furious series beyond mere thrill rides into iconic sagas. Emerging from the chilly, misty lanes of Shirebrook to the radiant glow of Tinseltown, he constructed his dominion not through advantage, but via toil, injuries, and perseverance. From peddling goods on London's avenues, a swimmer who fell short of his Olympic aspiration, to a fighter who etched his identity into fate with battle-worn fists. Each strike, pursuit, and blast you've witnessed him execute wasn't mere performance, but his authentic reality, molded from deprivation and agony. However, amid the thundering motors and stunning spectacles hides a profound quietude. The tale of a guy who almost perished when a massive 3-ton vehicle sank into the Black Sea, only to emerge unscathed through a wonder. Presently at 58 years old, bearing the imprints of aging, traumas, and recollections, Jason isn't merely a screen idol, but tangible evidence that even the toughest metal can dent and combatants can still hemorrhage. If you regard Jason Statham as more than a performer, but among the mightiest titans of genuine adrenaline cinema, press that thumbs up as homage to the fellow who converted adversity into myth. No illumination ever penetrates where famine resides. Yet that's the origin of Jason Statham's narrative. In the soot-covered village of Shirebrook, Derbyshire, where breezes howled via fractured panes and evenings outlasted optimism, entered existence on July 26, 1967, he stepped into an environment that required resilience prior to compassion. His mom, Eileen, was a performer whose ovations evaporated as swiftly as they arose. His dad, Barry, undertook any labor to sustain the household: collier at daybreak, decorator during daylight, roadside merchant, and tavern vocalist after dusk. Their modest abode reeked of charcoal fumes, cleanser, and subdued anxiety. The lone lamp over the cooking area flickered as his guardians tallied pennies, vowing that the morrow would extend somewhat more. Jason matured alongside his elder sibling Lee, grasping early that youth was an extravagance for different clans. He trailed his father across the frosty bazaars of Great Yarmouth, hawking inexpensive ornaments and scents to passers-by who seldom met his gaze. Decades afterward, he'd chuckle gently, stating, "My father instructed me in handstands before I mastered walking." It appeared whimsical, but concealed within was the reality that equilibrium was a skill he'd honed throughout his existence. Upon schooling's conclusion, most lads pursued soccer balls over soggy meadows. Jason sought velocity, karate strikes in rear passages, improvised plunges into whatever basin permitted entry. At age 12, he commenced rigorous preparation at London's Crystal Palace National Sports Centre. By that point, every dedicated plunger possessed a decade of experience. Diving demands initiation at 5. He'd concede subsequently with a wry smirk. "I began at 12. Overdue, yet not utterly adrift." He lingered in the liquid far beyond when peers departed, ascending repeatedly to the platform as the custodian extinguished illuminations. The basin chilled, the reverberations of his leaps his sole acclaim. His palms chafed bare, his sinews wailed, but he persisted in motion. The hush evolved into his mentor, the regimen his solitary companion. Season after season, he drilled. Periods merged, his realm contracting to mere yards of atmosphere and fluid. In 1990, he ultimately symbolized England at the Commonwealth Games, vaulting from the 10-meter ledge before global eyes. For a fleeting pulse, it appeared the lad from Shirebrook could ascend fully to the Olympics. But fortune wavered. In 1992, he fell short of the British Olympic squad by a solitary slot. One throb separating nearly from eternally. A decade of forfeiture dissolved beneath the tranquil expanse. He shed no tears. He merely observed the liquid settle, as though obliterating each undulation of his vision. The fluid yielded naught but stillness. That stillness pursued him, It nestled profoundly within, solidifying into forbearance, sculpting the individual he'd transform into. He comprehended then that exertion isn't invariably compensated, but stamina perpetually rebounds as fortitude. His father never verbalized how to embody strength. He demonstrated it by never surrendering when existence proffered zilch. Jason grasped that potency isn't birthed in triumph. It's bequeathed from strife. He departed the basin, but the teachings endured. The youth who once plunged into icy depths now hurled himself into existence proper. Every feat, every blow, every tumble that Tinseltown would eventually capture bore the specter of that youth who declined to cease when unobserved. He garnered no accolades. He acquired something scarcer, the vigor to ascend repeatedly from the abyss. And although the globe would eventually acclaim his moniker under the most brilliant beams, someplace behind his steadfast gaze still dwells that frigid basin in Shirebrook, the muted phantom of a youth who mastered ascension. It's devastating how existence occasionally doesn't shatter you abruptly. It accomplishes it gradually, one forfeited aspiration per instance. The era was 1992. Jason Statham had distanced himself from the basin that once reflected his ambitions and ventured into a metropolis indifferent to his identity or forfeitures. London was ashen, damp, and pitiless, a locale that engulfed the feeble and essayed the obstinate. The identical regimen that had steered him on the leaping plank now navigated him through the tempest of endurance. But this occasion, no instructors, no honors, no ovations, solely starvation, frigid gusts, and the clamor of footfalls that never halted for a fellow attempting to vend them a 5-pound vial of aspiration. He slumbered wherever the evening permitted, cramped dwellings with unfamiliar faces, chambers whose casements wouldn't seal, where the heater had long expired. Occasionally he'd rouse to behold his exhalation mist the atmosphere, envelop himself more snugly in a pre-owned overcoat and murmur, merely one additional day. Nourishment was a secondary consideration. A canister of legumes, a stale hoagie, a mug of brew that was more sweetener than heat. The precipitation savored metallic, and the gale nipped through the seams of his garment. He had mastered descent, and now he was mastering resurgence sans anyone perceiving. Between 1993 and 1996, Jason subsisted day to day, vending whatever feasible. Inexpensive aromas, timepieces, minor baubles, and occasionally the mirage of superior times. His timbre roughened from summoning strangers who never pivoted. I wasn't boastful of it, he'd concede subsequently. But I never deceived myself. I vended what I possessed because I declined to pilfer what I lacked. There were evenings when a patron hurled his merchandise back, damning that it reeked of deceit. Jason merely nodded. It did, but it was the sole entity sustaining him. At dusk, when the thoroughfares hushed, he'd drill in obscurity, push-ups adjacent to the cot, phantom pugilism before the reflector, combating the apparitions of defeat that orbited in muteness. "You execute one thing excessively well," he uttered once, "and they permit you naught else." When queried about enlisting in the Marvel cosmos, Jason once quipped, "I could attire my grandmother in a mantle and she'd accomplish it." It generated banners, but behind the wit was verity. He desired authenticity, not verdant displays. Proposals for profounder, theatrical parts dwindled. He had erected a dominion of detonations, but within there was still a fellow who desired to inhale. The hours were extensive, the strain unrelenting. Even as the globe enthroned him, it never ceased demanding more. The louder the ovation expanded, the subtler his evenings became. Achievement had saturated every chamber, but depleted every hush. There were evenings he would amble solitary after capturing. The metropolis slumbering, his form aching, his intellect replaying feats that nearly terminated him. The globe beheld invulnerability. He sensed depletion. He had confronted demise once, degradation at the ticket counter, the brutality of renown, and still he persisted in motion because that's what survivors execute. They don't halt when fatigued. They halt when completed. By now, Jason Statham had transcended a thespian. He was an emblem, the final of the authentic thrill protagonists, as Sylvester Stallone once denominated him. Every blow, every blemish, every fractured bone had become portion of a heritage inscribed not in comfort, but in valor. He had battled anguish, renown, and even demise. And somehow he was still erect. But the toughest skirmishes were never those captured on lens. They were the muted ones in lodging chambers, in recuperation cots, in the intervals between ovation and isolation. Behind the thunder of detonations and the rumble of ticket counter splendor, Jason Statham was mastering the subtle craft of endurance anew. And in the hush that ensued, he would soon confront skirmishes no narrative had ever penned. His vocation was a tempest of victories and ordeals, and his core, it appears, mastered to endure the identical. Long prior to the crimson rugs and billion-dollar ticket counters, there was her, Kelly. She was already renowned then, the variety of allure that made lenses pursue and throngs hesitate. He was still swindling, still ascending, a roadway-savvy visionary from Shirebrook, attempting to discover his niche in a realm that hadn't yet unlatched its portals. Together they were Bolt and Serenity, Blaze and Alloy, the ascending poser and the television sweetheart who for a period believed in the identical eternity. In those initial eras, existence was uncomplicated. London dusks, inexpensive suppers, mirth resounding through minor dwellings that reeked of pigment and delivery cuisine. She would mock him about his relentless drills. He'd smirk and vow, "Someday I'll render it worthy of your forbearance." And for a period he did. When Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels struck theaters, the Globe noticed Jason Statham. But she had beheld him long prior to the beam did. Renown arrived swiftly, and it arrived ravenous. While Jason expended lengthy days on set, Kelly's realm was already whirling in television beams and glossy periodicals. Two vocations ascending in contrary directions, one toward tenacity and peril, the other toward elegance and simplicity. They endeavored to cling, to safeguard the minor realm they'd constructed before the clamor arrived. But achievement has a brutal manner of altering the atmosphere between individuals. He commenced to voyage more. She commenced to be captured solitary. Calls remained unreciprocated. Grins turned courteous. The hush between them expanded heavier than utterances. See you in the next video. He possessed no funds, no scheme, no notion that existence was subtly molding him into the fellow the Globe would eventually dub a myth. You discover, he'd reminisce years hence, that honor isn't what you possess, it's what you decline to forfeit. Then, unexpectedly, emerged the initial glimmer of radiance. While honing at the Crystal Palace Sports Center, he was noticed by Sports Promotions, a London firm scouting competitors with genuine tenacity. They admired his visage, not comely in the conventional manner, but authentic, chiseled by tribulation. Soon he was posing for Tommy Hilfiger, Levi's, Griffin, and subsequently French Connection, whose initiatives sought males who appeared to have genuinely existed. He was compensated in sterling. But what he attained was conviction that perhaps after all this, he could still signify something. But renown didn't ensue. The illuminations of the photographic studio were vivid, but the remuneration meager. Between sessions, Jason reverted to the identical avenues endeavoring to vend minor fantasies in glossy flasks. He'd chortle about it subsequently. "I was a swindler," he'd utter with that lopsided smirk the Globe would familiarize. It preserved me. Behind the wit, though, resided a verity solely he comprehended. The metropolis that disregarded him had also forged him. Then arrived the day destiny wrapped literally. Guy Ritchie, a youthful filmmaker readying his debut feature, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, sought someone capable of portraying a roadway swindler. When he encountered Jason via a modeling liaison, he beheld not a thespian. He beheld veracity. Jason didn't try out. He narrated tales the manner he once vended chronometers, straightforward, unrefined, crude. He discoursed of London nooks, of bargains awry, of evenings that reeked of downpour and remorse. Richie hearkened, mute, examining him like a sequence unfolding. Then, midway, he inclined forward and uttered softly, "You're the fellow. You needn't perform. You've endured it." That utterance would alter everything. The part compensated merely $5,000, but it was valued beyond Orem. For the initial occasion, Jason's blemishes, his muteness, his unprocessed vigor, all the elements the globe once disregarded became his paramount asset. His existence had circled completely. The avenue that once demeaned him had now scripted his narrative. He didn't ascend because the globe proffered him an opportunity. He ascended because he declined to let it shatter him. Every rebuff, every frigid evening, every inexpensive chamber had primed him for this. The identical precipitation that once chilled him now sparkled on cinematographic illuminations. The thoroughfares that never halted for him now bore his moniker on billboards. From starvation to banners, from icy sidewalks to silver screens, Jason Statham became tangible evidence that anguish, when borne with honor, can metamorphose into potency. And endurance itself can evolve into artistry. And even now, decades hence, when renown has supplanted starvation and muteness has transmuted to acclaim, there are evenings he still ambles solitary, as if London never truly departed him. It's devastating how destiny compensates solely after it essays, but fate had already unlatched its portals, and awaiting behind them was a realm that would both enthrone him and pulverize him. In 1998, lock, stock, and two smoking barrels detonated onto the display, and 31-year-old Jason Statham's existence was irrevocably altered. He didn't try out. He merely conversed. Keen, amusing, unvarnished. Guy Ritchie beheld not a thespian, but a fellow who had endured what he was about to embody. The globe beheld it likewise. His tenacity was genuine. His hush resounded louder than discourse. And Tinseltown had just encountered a novel variety of protagonist, one who didn't feign toughness. He embodied toughness. 2 years hence came Snatch, embodying Turkish beside Brad Pitt. Jason was no longer the obscure swindler. He was the pulse of British thrill cinema. The feature generated over $80 million. And abruptly, the lad from Shirebrook was positioned on crimson rugs beside the very countenances he once observed on VHS cassettes. Yet behind that keen formal attire was the identical fellow who once tallied pennies to acquire legumes. Then arrived the Transporter in 2002, the feature that transmuted Jason Statham into a worldwide luminary. He drilled for months perfecting Wing Chun, kickboxing, and Krav Maga. Every thrust, every impact, every detonation authentic. He declined a double for feats. "If I sustain injury," he uttered, "at least it's sincere." And he did sustain injury. Ripped tendons, contused ribs, a joint that still snaps today. There were dawns his digits quivered merely lacing his footwear, and dusks when frozen compresses supplanted cushions. He jested away, but each blemish narrated the verity. The contusions don't deceive. By 2005, he propelled himself further with Crank, a feature that resembled an epinephrine surge on display. Epinephrine became his breath, one reviewer inscribed. But even breath can asphyxiate. Achievement signified never decelerating. Between 2002 and 2010, he captured nearly 2 features annually, soaring amid continents, subsisting from valises, combating on lens by daylight, drilling by twilight. "You rouse contused and slumber fractured," he once conceded. "But you executed anew the subsequent day because that's your essence." Yet not every skirmish concluded in conquest. In 2005, Revolver, his reunion with Guy Ritchie, plummeted catastrophically. $27 million expenditure, $7 million yield. Detractors labeled it arrogant drivel. The camaraderie that launched his vocation nearly disintegrated under the burden of that debacle. Then War in 2007 faltered likewise. And in 2015, Wildcard scarcely surpassed $6 million on a $30 million outlay. Tinseltown, the identical apparatus that once extolled him, commenced murmuring a harsh term: substitutable. Still, Jason never yielded. He battled his path back with the bank job in 2008, a gritty, astute robbery feature that reminded all he wasn't merely knuckles, he was concentration. It amassed $66 million and reinstated his position amid the elite. Then arrived The Expendables in 2010, positioned arm-to-arm with Stallone, Jet Li, and Dolph Lundgren. Jason wasn't the youth admiring legends anymore. He was among them. The eras that ensued were both horrid and arduous. Fast and Furious 7 transmuted him into a universal sensation. Over $1.5 billion at the ticket counter. He became the antagonist admirers couldn't despise. The fellow whose scowl could sustain a feature. Then arrived The Meg in 2018, a colossal triumph that amassed $527 million globally. At 51, he had definitively subdued every niche of the thrill realm, from London avenues to Tinseltown seas. But behind the ovation, the beams, and the clamor was a subtler conflict. Tinseltown adored his knuckles, but not his sentiments.